All right, let's go ahead to Titus real quickly and look at this epistle of Titus. Titus was the 12th letter written by Paul. It is one of his shortest, only 3 chapters. Okay? It is a personal letter to a dear friend and co-laborer. Like 1 Timothy, it was written between Paul's 2 Roman imprisonments as he traveled on what I call here his 4th missionary journey. We don't actually have his 4th missionary journey recorded in Scripture, but we do believe that he traveled and may have gone as far as Spain, and there is some historical evidence that he may have even reached the British Isles during this travel. Okay, Paul obviously visited Crete on his way to Ephesus, and upon his departure from Crete, he requested Titus to remain and strengthen the churches in every city on that island. So if you look at the map I gave you several weeks ago, you'll see where Crete is. Paul went to Crete, preached the gospel there, met the churches there, fellowship with the believers, and then he was going to travel on to Ephesus. And so he says, Titus, I think it would be helpful if you would stay here in Crete while I go to Titus. These churches need you. They need to be taught. They need to be instructed. They need to be straightened out in some areas. And so would you stay here on the island of Crete? What a tough assignment. A Mediterranean island. Okay, Paul, I guess if I have to. Okay? But, I get to eat all this Mediterranean seafood every day, and that would be a tough assignment, to have to spend time on Crete. But anyway, Titus gets to stay in Crete and conduct the ministry there. There's no biblical record as to how the gospel first reached Crete. According to Acts 2, there were some Cretans who were in Jerusalem on the day of Pentecost who heard the gospel, became believers, and were baptized. And so probably they went back to their hometown, their home island, and shared the gospel they had heard in Jerusalem. And the church had been established there. The only other visit Paul had made to the island was when he was a prisoner being transported to Rome for trial in Acts 27, as far as the biblical record is concerned. Paul is the author. He's mentioned 1 time by name and only 7 times with personal pronouns. So that indicates it's not so much a personal, how you doing, buddy, I'm glad to be able to write you this letter, as it is, this is more down to earth and down to business kind of a thing. Paul writing to Timothy to give him some specific instructions for his ministry among the Cretans. Okay, as far as this letter, Paul identifies himself as a servant of God, as an apostle of Christ, as being knowledgeable about Cretan society, and of being anxiously awaiting the return of Christ. I want to show you this knowledgeable about Cretan society just for a minute. Look at chapter 1, verse 12 and 13. Even one of their own prophets has said, Cretans are always liars, evil brutes, lazy gluttons. This testimony is true. Therefore rebuke them sharply, so they will be sound in the faith. Now what does that tell you about Paul? Well, he's well educated. He had been reading the writings of Cretan poets. The guy who wrote this was a guy by the name of Epimenides. You go back and do a little bit of research in your Encyclopedia Britannica or on the internet, and you'll find Epimenides, and he wrote this about the Cretans. He had visited Crete, and I believe he was actually from Crete, and he says, this Mediterranean lifestyle is just wearing away at the incentive for people to do stuff. The Cretans just enjoy this little island out here in the Mediterranean, wouldn't you? Okay, they can go out and fish and catch enough fish to last a few days. They dry them in the sun, and when their fish run out, they go catch a few more. They raise some wheat and trade some fish for some flour or whatever, and they kind of are laid back. They have a very laid back lifestyle, and they enjoy eating and drinking and a Mediterranean island life. Okay, I think yeah, kind of like surfer dudes. Yeah, I guess something like that. Okay, they just kind of take it easy. And now, what's interesting to me, and it's not brought out here, but Paul quotes this Epimenides guy one other time, as far as I know. Maybe others, but as far as I can remember, only one other time. And it's in Acts 17, when he goes to Athens. And remember when he went to Athens, he looked at all the idolatry of the city of Athens, and he said, I saw this one inscription to the unknown God. It was Epimenides who had visited Athens about 3 centuries before Paul came along. So Epimenides is dead and gone a long time. But he had visited Athens during a plague. And they had asked him for advice on how to get the plague relieved. And he said, you've got to idol to every god, nothing's working. What you need to understand is there's a God somewhere who can take care of the need if you'll only acknowledge him. We don't know what his name is, so we'll just call him Agnostos Theos, the unknown God. And so Epimenides instructed them to build this altar to the unknown God, and according to history, when they did that, within a week, the plague had stopped. And some of the Athenians have said that if we had only known who this God is, we could have done away with all these other gods. But they didn't know until Paul came 3 centuries later and talked to them about Jesus. Okay? But Epimenides is the guy who Paul knew about. He knew the story behind that, I'm sure, based on what he says in Acts 17. But Paul was a very well-educated guy, what I'm trying to say. He knew the philosophies of the old region as well as the truth of the gospel. And he knew the characteristic of the Cretans, and so he tells Titus, you need to stay here and rebuke these people and tell them to straighten up and, quit laying back, taking it easy every day, get up and be busy, doing what they need to be doing to serve Christ. Even today, we use the term Cretan, don't we? To talk about somebody kind of a little bit backward, okay? All right, and then he also says he's anxious for the return of Christ. If you look at chapter 2, verse 13, I find it. While we wait for the blessed hope and the glorious appearing of our great God and Savior, Jesus Christ. What are we doing? We are waiting for Christ to come. Now, he tells Timothy a few years later when he writes 2 Timothy, I'm about ready to go to heaven. But at this point, he's not looking to die. He's looking for the rapture. You see, he doesn't have this attitude. He didn't have a woe with me attitude anyway. But he didn't have the attitude of 2 Timothy where, my time's almost up. You better come see me. I'm going to die. I'm going to be executed. He has the hopeful expectation of not only continuing his ministry, but of seeing Jesus break through the clouds one day in a rapture and going to see him, the glorious appearing of Christ. Recipient of the book was Titus. He's only mentioned one time by name in this letter. He's referred to 9 times by second-person pronouns, but he's mentioned elsewhere in Paul's writings 12 times, most of those in 2 Corinthians. It was Titus that Paul used to curry the letters back and forth to the Corinthians back a few weeks ago when we were looking at 1 and 2 Corinthians. Titus was the one who was primarily involved with Paul in that ministry. We know from Paul's writings that Titus was a convert of Paul. He says in chapter 1, verse 4, to Titus, my true son in our common faith, so I have brought you to Christ, I've led you to Christ. He was a companion of Paul at the Jerusalem Council. He was a comfort to Paul and a confidant of Paul. And there's some references that you can look at that will show you the connection between these two men. So those are things that we know based on what Paul wrote. Based on what we can infer from Paul's writings, Titus was probably from Antioch in Syria. Okay, remember there were 2 different Antiochs. We believe Paul was from Antioch in Syria, which would be where Barnabas and Saul did their ministry together. He was of strong character, or of stronger character than Timothy. Timothy was shy and timid and withdrawn. Titus was more of a sanguine type personality. He was in better physical health, where he told Timothy he needed to be careful and take medicine and keep himself strong. He doesn't have to say anything like that to Timothy, or to Titus rather. We kind of get the idea Timothy is a robust kind of guy. Paul refers to Titus as being his son in the faith, his brother in the faith, and a partner and fellow helper in the faith. Probably written around, as far as the date and place of writing is concerned, written around 62 to 63 A.D. It was probably written about the same time as 1 Timothy, after Paul's release from his first Roman imprisonment. And there are references there. As far as where it was written from, maybe Macedonia or Ephesus. His purpose was to urge Titus to set in order the affairs of the churches on Crete. Look at chapter 1, verse 5. The reason I left you in Crete was that you might straighten out what was left unfinished and appoint elders in every town as I directed you. Okay, Titus, don't forget why I left you there. I didn't leave you there so you could enjoy the Mediterranean lifestyle. Okay, I left you there for a purpose. You need to straighten out things that are lacking doctrinally in the churches there. You need to make sure that every town where there's a church, that they have a leader in that church, elders, ordained pastors in all of these churches, so that they can continue the ministry when you're somewhere else. And that was seemed to be one of the big problems that they were having. They didn't have local leadership that had been trained enough and instructed enough to be able to guide the churches and the believers in the way they should be serving. So he writes to urge Timothy to set those things in order. He also writes to instruct, I say Timothy, I meant Titus. He also writes to instruct Titus concerning the character of men to be ordained to lead the churches. All right, if you're going to ordain men, he says they need to have certain qualifications. Verse 6 says, an elder must be blameless, the husband of but one wife, a man whose children believe and are not open to the charge of being wild and disobedient. Since an overseer is entrusted with God's work, he must be blameless, not overbearing, not quick-tempered, not given to drunkenness, not violent, not pursuing dishonest gain. Rather, he must be hospitable, one who loves what is good, who is self-controlled, upright, holy, and disciplined. He must hold firmly to the trustworthy message. So those were the qualifications Titus was to look for in all of these cities and in all these churches. That if you're going to ordain elders to lead these churches, they have to be men of good quality good character who can be trusted to do this work. He wrote also to challenge Titus to stand firm against the unchristian character of the Cretan. We talked about that already. To urge Titus to teach sound doctrine to the churches in Crete. It says in chapter 2, verse 1, you must teach what is in accord with sound doctrine. Then he goes on and tells just what that is. He wrote to urge Titus to establish he wrote to establish for Titus the personal qualities to be built into the lives of the believers. Key thought is order in the church. He wrote to set things in order, he said. We read chapter 1, verse 5, chapter 2, verse 1. Look at chapter 3, verse 1. Remind the people to be subject to rulers and authorities, to be obedient, to be ready to do whatever is good, to slander no one, to be peaceable and considerate, and to show true humility toward all men. So what he's doing is urging Titus to be very practical in teaching the believers there. They've already come to know Christ by faith, and they've been saved by the grace of God, but they need to learn how to live a Christian life and how to exemplify Christ through their daily living. And so he tells Titus how to set all these things in order. And you see the key words there, and you see the outline